In this three-part series, we've broken down the unproven guys. We've broken down the proven guys. We've done in-depth breakdowns of over 9 head coaching candidates because of how important this decision is going to be. And this week, in part 3, we get a final answer because we're finally going to talk about why I and the fans truly believe that Gregg Williams should and will be the head coach in 2019. So at this point, there's really only 3 options for John Dorsey to really consider as the head coach for the Browns next year. Because Gregg Williams and this Cleveland Browns team winning late has kind of forced his hand a little bit and made his decisions more narrow. Because if this team sputtered out the gate, finished 4-12, you could do whatever, hire whoever you want to turn this thing around. But when you finish strong, winning 5, possibly 6 out of your last 8 games, then it comes into question whether we should get rid of the interim guy. And if you do get rid of the interim guy, what if you start off slow next year? The team's going to check out because they felt like they had the right guy last year. They bought into the right stuff last year, and it's going to make it that much harder for the new coach to get a grasp on the team. Also, another reason it gets harder is because the team finished so well, the expectations for the next year aren't going to be just more improvement. It's going to be playoff expectations. So now you have to hire somebody you believe from day one can not just be functional, but lead one of the better teams in the league. And that's a hard ask. There's not a lot of people that can do that. And because of all these factors, the winning, the culture change that's going on right now, it narrows down your field of options because there are only so many people you can bring in without immediately losing the locker room. Because these players are on a mindset that, hey, if you're going to replace Gregg Williams, it better be with somebody amazing because we already believe in this guy. So in my eyes, there's only 3 people that can possibly be the Browns head coach. It's Mike McCarthy, since he has a Super Bowl ring and he's won in this league for a decade. And then there's Lincoln Riley because he brings so much excitement and possible innovation. And then there's Gregg Williams, whose resume on paper might not stack up to the other candidates. But just look at what he's done in 8 weeks. Because in 8 weeks, he's done what hasn't been done since arguably Butch Davis. That is changing a culture and creating an identity for a team that fostered winning. More than the win total itself, that's the important part when you talk about Gregg Williams, is the culture, the environment, and the identity that he's given this team. Because there are coaches who can win some games sometimes in the league, but their team doesn't have an identity. Think when Mike Pettin went 7-9, the team had no identity. And there are coaches who can win with an identity. And Gregg Williams, who nobody predicted, gave this team an identity, an aggressive identity that from the top to the bottom of the roster is felt, and it improves this team. With Gregg Williams, you have the confidence of knowing that team's going to have an identity. With any of these other guys, do you have that confidence? Because again, in just 8 weeks, Gregg Williams has changed the culture and made this team dangerous to play in the month of December. Now, yeah, they have a quarterback, but you know what? The quarterback fits the identity like a glove. And there's a lot of reasons to be excited. There's a lot of reasons not to be excited for Gregg Williams. There's a lot of reasons to want other guys. But essentially, for this year's coaching search, it's boiled down to 3 people and 3 options. And those 3 options are essentially one guy who's done everything you could do on paper, win 10 games consistently throughout a 10-plus year career. He has over 10 years of coaching experience. He has won over 10 games consistently in that career. He has won a Super Bowl. He's won a Super Bowl. But for whatever reason, he got kicked out of Green Bay. And those fans in Green Bay are reacting to Mike McCarthy being fired from Green Bay a lot like Browns fans did to Hugh Jackson. So maybe they know something. And then you have a college coach who has insane upside, but only 2 years of major college football head coaching experience. Is he in the position to take over a team who next year's expectations are going to be playoffs? And then lastly, you got the guy who makes absolutely no sense on paper, but he happened to get the job on an interim basis. And in 8 weeks, he's done things that haven't been done since this team came back in 1999. And he did it with the same roster that the coach who had the job to start the year only won 2 games with. He has done everything from an on the field and in the locker room perspective that you can ask for a head coaching candidate to do. But his resume has nothing there that gives you any confidence that this is going to last long. Now, when it comes to hiring Gregg Williams, there are a lot of people who aren't on board with that. There are a lot of people who are on board with it, but there are a lot of people who that idea scares the living hell out of them. And honestly, I can't look at them like they're crazy. I can't fault somebody for wondering what the long-term perspectives are for a guy who's known for things like this.
Coach, you do a lozenge?
No, I got a lozenge.
It's a natural question. Gregg Williams is intense. Things that are intense tend to burn out quicker. And the question is, will Gregg Williams' voice, will his message, will his method get old? And that's a legitimate question. My answer to that would be he's a different guy as a head coach than he is as a defensive coordinator. Now, to those who think that's hard to believe because of his strong personality as a defensive coordinator, it is something that is universally true between all coordinators and head coaches. They are different guys when they're coordinators than when they're head coaches. That's why there's some coordinators that seem like great head coaching candidates when they're coordinators, but when they become head coaches, it doesn't pan out because they become a different dude. Now, Gregg Williams, to his respect, has been a different Gregg Williams, at least to the media. He's not as confrontational.
And we're not here to talk about that. Are you, Tony? Yeah, we're not here to talk about that. What else you want to talk about? Is there a quote out there of me ever talking about it? So you want to be the first guy that has a quote?
I found quotes from you about
Use that one then.
He's calmer. He has a more relaxed tone. It stands to believe that maybe he's different in the meetings and not as Gregg Williamsy as he was as a coordinator. And the thing you have to consider is that now that the team has a quarterback who is a natural leader, it's not really on Gregg and his voice and his message to drive the team. You can lean on your quarterback for that and his voice. And what that allows Gregg Williams to do is kind of take a step back. He doesn't have to scream as much because he knows Baker's going to hold his guys accountable. He's not going to yell as much. He's not going to be prone to so many tirades because he knows that he has a quarterback who's going to hold his guys accountable, who's going to make sure that he can take some of the burden off of him and apply that pressure to his guys. That's the other great thing about Gregg Williams. He allows your quarterback, who has a very interesting personality, to be himself. He doesn't feel like he has to hold things in. He has to be restrained. He has to, be a robot. He feels like he can be himself. He can be real. He can be honest, and he's comfortable in that. And I think that's also part of the reason you've seen him have a major jump since Hugh Jackson was fired. But Gregg Williams allowing that structure to feature the franchise quarterback in his voice creates an environment, a winning culture, a structure that makes him and his style more sustainable because it's like that from on down. Baker's a fiery guy. Freddie Kitchens is a fiery guy. Gregg Williams is a fiery guy. Everybody's fiery. So you know what to expect and you know what you need to do in order to succeed in Cleveland if you're somebody new walking in. This is what makes longevity possible. This is why teams can have the same head coach for years and years and years and not have to worry about is the message getting old, because they have established leadership in different positions that kind of set the tone throughout. And when you look at the off the field things with Gregg Williams, I'm going to keep continuing this point. He has a lot in common with some of the guys that he's asking to lead. He wasn't the consensus pick for the job. Baker Mayfield wasn't a consensus number 1 overall pick. A lot of people thought it was a gamble. There were guys who on paper looked a lot better than him. You know, people were smitten with Sam Darnold and his personality. And it's easy to look at Gregg Williams and feel like you're going to miss out because you keep Gregg Williams. Because look, Mike McCarthy's out there. He has a Super Bowl ring. He has been 10-6 so many times in his career. Oh my God. And then you look to the other side and you see Lincoln Riley, who has an historically great offense in college football in an era in the NFL where college offenses are having way more success than they have ever had. And you look at Gregg Williams, who is not flashy, who is not a sexy hire, who doesn't have one of those oh my God qualities about him that jump off a piece of paper, and you feel a little let down. But you have to look at what he's done with the job he was given. And when a guy can step in after 8 weeks and create a culture, when the guy can step in after 8 weeks and create an identity, when a guy can step in after 8 weeks and completely turn the season around after you've lost 4 games in a row, and what was supposed to be one of the tougher parts in the season. When a guy comes in and does the job and you're breaking records that you haven't broken since before this team was a expansion team. And yes, it has a lot to do with who's at quarterback, but Hugh Jackson had that same quarterback and he didn't achieve these things. Hell, when Hugh Jackson left, the quarterback's completion rate rose by over 10%. You have something in Cleveland that seems like it could be special. Don't overlook it just because you think you might be able to do better. Look at who's there for you now, what they're doing for you now, and realize you don't really got to look anywhere else, because the guy who's doing the things that we want to have happen, that we would hire a guy in hopes that he would do, well, this guy right here, he's already doing it. Now, we could talk about Mike McCarthy, but you know what's going to stop him? It went really bad in Green Bay. His offenses were unimaginative and he didn't adapt to the modern day. And ultimately, if you want to keep Freddie Kitchens around as the offensive coordinator, the guy that Baker has a bond with, you have to let Freddie be Freddie. And Mike McCarthy is way too established and doesn't have the track record of letting his offensive coordinators be their own person. He normally takes over for play calling if something gets rough throughout the season. He always steps in there because that's his forte. And while Lincoln Riley is a really exciting candidate, I think it's just not the right time. Maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, it might be more interesting and intriguing for Lincoln Riley after he's achieved some things at Oklahoma. But right now, I would forget about it happening. Because one, even if you do get Lincoln Riley, the expectations for next year are way too high for a guy who's going to be transitioning from college to the NFL. So while there are flashier choices, while people might pound on desk and tell you that this guy's the right guy and Gregg Williams is a joke, block all that out and watch and pay attention to what the guy who's had the job has been able to do. And it's not just the record. Look at the identity of the team. Look at how hard they play. Those are the important factors to look into. Thank you guys for watching this 3-part series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button. My name's Quincy Carrier, and this has been another episode of Worst Take. Thank you very much.